All right, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to my channel. I'm Thomas, and I do educational videos on many different subjects. We are working on a unit on the reciprocal system of theory of Dewey B. Larson, and you might want to go back and check out any of the 45 other videos that I've done before this, just to get some background. Um, the reciprocal system began to be developed by Larson back in around 1930. He worked on it for over 20 years before he arrived at his fundamental postulates, two fundamental postulates that were kind of a distillation of his whole theory, his whole line of thinking and research. And then he took those postulates and he deductively developed an entire theoretical universe of how the universe operates. And he wrote books on physics and astrophysics and chemistry and astronomy and also economics. And on just about every aspect of those things, generally, over the next 35, 40 years until he died in 1990. And then his theory has been kind of revised slightly. Some people are orthodox and some people are revisionist. There are very few people involved in any of this, but the ones who are, some have tried to revise his and correct certain errors that they say he made. Others are very orthodox in their approach, but that's where we're at right now. And I feel like I'm hoping that the theory doesn't fall by the wayside because it's very valuable. And I think that ultimately it will win out and it will become the basis of all science, social science and hard science, eventually. Now, right now, we're looking at his final book that's called Beyond Space and Time. That book is on metaphysics, where he extends the theory. This is his final book published after he died, and it extends into areas like psychology and also I'm drawing a blank on the other areas, psychology, religion, and there's one more, philosophy. So just kind of like the softer sciences. And he has chapters on things like free will, and we just got done with doing the chapter on revelation. We're now on a chapter called information. He has chapters on thinking and memory that are coming up. And so let me just lay out, here's his first fundamental postulate, which is the major, one of his two fundamental postulates that he began. So then once he had this, then he developed this, if this, then that kind of approach to constructing his theoretical universe. The physical universe is composed entirely of one component, motion, existing in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. Okay, my basic translation of that is that the universe is not made out of matter, it's not made out of energy, it's made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time are the same, except that they are reciprocals of each other. And they both have a minimum unit, a discrete unit, and nothing can be less than that unit. So, and basically, Einstein would say that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. Larson, with his universe of motion, says that the speed of light is the neutral point of the universe, or the midpoint of the universe, and that there is one half of the universe that moves slower than the speed of light, and one half of the universe that moves faster than the speed of light. And when you cross that boundary, you're basically just flipping the roles of space and time. So over here, you have all these relationships that are more related to space over time, whereas over here, you have all the relationships that are based on time over space. This is what is called the material sector, and this is what he calls the cosmic sector. And the material sector is like the realm, especially of chemistry, atoms, and molecules. But once an atom or molecule builds up to its most complex level, which he defines as DNA being billions of atoms in one molecule, then it becomes eligible to be taken control of by a cosmic entity, and calls it a control unit, and that takes control of the material unit and turns it into a life unit. And so this life unit then evolves or progresses or whatever you want to call it, and until it gets to its most complex level, which he defines as the intelligent human being and or humanoid, and then it becomes eligible to be taken control of by a what he calls a sector 3 entity. Sector 1 is the material sector, sector 2 is the cosmic sector, sector 3 is an entity that is beyond space and time, independent of space and time. And I would say that you get to that with a fraction of 1 over 1. 1 unit of space, 1 unit of time. Space and time cancel out. You just have 1. And that 1 is the speed of light. And that is, Larson doesn't say this explicitly as far as I know, but that entity is, what Larson calls sector 3, and sector 3 is really God. And Larson just uses a technical term, a non-biased term for it. And so he goes through and discusses, how that sector 3 unit then becomes kind of in competition with the sector 2 unit, where the sector 2 unit's objectives are based upon survival, and the sector 3 unit's objectives are based on ethical behavior. And so there are certain times where those dovetail and work together, but there are also certain times where they conflict. And that's where kind of like the free will or the decision-making process comes in. If you've watched any of my Tree of Life videos, that's the 6th sphere. In particular, in my videos, it's the 6th fractal of the 7th sphere, crossroads situation, number 41. So you can check that video there on number 41. Okay, now we had just gone through 3 chapters where he talks about different communications from sector 3 and refers to them interchangeably as ESP, intuition, scientific insight, and religious revelation, and says that those 4 are categorized separately because of the different contexts and the different levels of detail, but they basically are all the same fundamental thing, communication from sector 3. And this chapter on information, we just got done with his discussion on, he was talking about the Earth, and he's saying that the Earth is, on this basis, the Earth as a whole consists of what it is and what it does. if the Earth could be separated from its environment and turned over to a group of scientists for examination as an aggregate of matter, these investigators would find nothing at all that would account for many of the conspicuous phenomena that are observed when the Earth is in its usual condition. The alternation of light and darkness, the tides, the seasonal variations of temperature, and so on. These are all products of the processes that determine the manner in which the Earth, in its normal environment, reacts to external stimuli, such as radiation of the sun. So the Earth is both a material thing and a cosmic thing. These are the processes. This is what it is. This is what it does. And then he, as we'll go into now, he applies the same analogy to the human level. One of the long-standing puzzles of philosophy is the so-called mind-body problem. The question as to the relation of the mind to the corresponding structure, the brain. And, he says that it's, one of the baffling problems of philosophy, and he goes into some of the other philosophers who've discussed this. There is in the human body a material structure, the brain, which has the capacity to undergo certain processes, just as the material structure called the earth can undergo certain processes, that is, move in certain ways. In the living brain, such a system of processes is in operation, a system which we call the mind. The brain is an aggregate of matter. The mind is an aggregate of processes. Both are aggregates of motion, and one is just as real as the other. As in the case of the earth, the nature of the reaction to external stimuli is determined primarily by the processes that are in operation. The mind-body problem, as it is heretofore been conceived, is the result of viewing mind and body as separate entities. So he's rejecting that and saying, that it is not there is one single aggregate of motions, the mind-brain, we might call it. Using the terminology previously defined, we may say that this mind-brain consists of a brain, which is what the mind-brain is, and a mind, which is what the mind-brain does. And he says, the brain is analogous to the hardware of the computer, and the mind is analogous to the computer operating systems. Not the written description of those programs, but the actual operating processes that the programs describe. And it may be difficult for people not familiar with the reciprocal system to see the resemblance between the earth, which is moving, and the brain, which in the context of the local environment is not moving. Again, assuming that the earth is moving. But the activities of the mind are carried on by means of electrical processes. And one of the consequences of the fundamental postulates of the reciprocal system is that electrical activity in an aggregate of matter is equivalent to motion of that aggregate. The units of electricity, the electrons, move through matter, not between the atoms of matter. And the mathematical relations applicable to the motion of matter through space are equally applicable under comparable conditions to motion of electrons through matter. In other books, he defines an electron as a rotating unit of space. The relationship of space to matter is made out of time. So the relationship of the electron and the matter is motion. So the electron is a rotating unit of space rotating through matter. So the physical status of what the mind brain does is therefore identical to that of what the earth does. And then he kind of goes into a little bit of the okay, similarly, if the mind is damaged, that is, one or more of the processes subjected to some detrimental change, the output from the intact brain will be wrong because it is the result of a defective process. The reason for the inability to find any evidence of existence of the mind when the brain is dissected is also clear. When life ends, the processes that have been taking place in the brain cease. And since those processes are the mind no longer exists. Where did it go, some may ask? The motions of which the mind is constituted follow the same course as any other motions that can no longer exist in the previous form. They are converted into other types of motion, such as heat or radiation. Now, he goes into a discussion here about various different philosophers and what they've had to say: Kant, Spinoza, Bergson, and Descartes. And then back to his own assertions, we find that there is also another aspect of the human personality which has some characteristics attributed to the mind by Descartes, including those which are generally classified as spiritual. But this aspect, we find, is non-physical, whereas mind is merely non-material and is as definitely a part of the physical universe as the brain or as any other part of the body. Okay, so again, we got this boundary of the speed of light. Over here, we have the time, space over time relationships below the speed of light. That's the material sector. And then over here, we have the cosmic sector. This is where this is the brain and this is the mind. Over here, the cosmic sector, where you have time over space relationships faster than the speed of light. And this is where the mind comes from. And this is non-material, but it is still physical. This is still a physical entity. And then you have the sector 3, which is independent of space and time. And that entity is non-physical, and that's what he calls sector 3. So the sector 3 is non-physical, whereas the sector 2 is non-material, but it is still physical. Okay, with the foregoing understanding of the nature of the receiving apparatus of the communication process, we are now ready to examine the transmission aspect of the process. Inasmuch as the objective of this work is an exploration of the metaphysical region, neither the mind, which is physical, nor the physical transmission of information is within the area of coverage, and no comprehensive treatment of either of these subjects will be undertaken. However, a general understanding of the manner in which physical information is handled in the communication systems is essential for a full appreciation of the manner in which the information from intuitive sources fits into the picture. In order that physical messages of some particular kind may be received, there must be a structure in the body, a sense, which is capable of transforming the motions that constitute the incoming signal into the kind of motion that will affect the processes of the mind. And evolution, so-called, has produced senses that receive messages which satisfy two criteria. They are present in the environment in significant amounts, and they are useful to the organism. One of the reasons most frequently advanced for the rejection of the concept of intuitive processes such as ESP is that there is no evidence of any physical structure in the human body for receiving information of this kind. And the obvious answer is that since the intuitive mode of transmission is not physical, there is no need for a physical type of receiving apparatus. At the present stage of our knowledge of the subject, we do not know just how the control unit from Sector 3 exercises direction of the activities of the biological organism. From the information developed in Chapter 7, it is clear that such direction is being exercised, and it follows that some means must exist whereby this is accomplished. One possibility that naturally suggests itself is that, inasmuch as the effect of chance plays a large part in the interaction of electrical and material motions, the metaphysical influence may supersede the operation of the normal probability principles and thereby modify the results of the individual's mental processes without violating any physical laws. In any event, the answer to the question as to how the intuitive information is received is that the communication is direct from Sector 3 to the control unit through Sector 3 channels, and the effect on the mental processes is then exerted in the same manner as the control functions, whatever that manner may be. Okay, so the key point here is he's saying that or proposing that these non-physical processes can take place to overrule normal probability principles. So when you have a quantum mechanics type situation where something is under the governance of probability, this Sector 3 unit can step in and take control over that process without disrupting, any physical laws. Okay, we'll get back to this again next time, and have a great day.